I'm a 30-year-old woman named Caroline, and for the past 10 years, I've been the single one at every family holiday. Every Christmas, without fail, someone would point it out. One year, it was a sarcastic comment about how the only ring I'd ever wear was the one on my phone. Another year, my father thought it would be hilarious to gift me a spinster starter kit, a bathrobe, knitting needles, and a box of herbal tea. Everyone laughed. I forced a smile. That was the routine. My younger sister Ellie is married with 2 kids and lives less than a mile from our parents in Pennsylvania. She's the kind of person who posts color-coded lunchbox pictures and vacation slideshows with inspirational captions. My older brother Dylan lives in New York and works in finance. He's not very involved unless there's food or sports involved. Out of all of us, I'm the only one who moved far away. I live in Boston and work as a graphic designer for a publishing company. For years, every time I came home, I braced myself. Ellie would go on about her kids and how parenting is the hardest job in the world. My mother would slide in some comment about how the holidays must be quiet for me. And someone, usually Ellie, would make a crack like even cereal gets picked. The family would laugh. I'd pretend to. My dating life became a joke they all recycled like bad wrapping paper. I tried addressing it once. I told my mom it hurt. She brushed it off and said humor was our love language. When I told Ellie to cut it out, she called me sensitive and told me I was overreacting. After that, I stopped bringing it up. I just stopped bringing anyone home, period. The truth is, I wasn't single because I couldn't find anyone. I just didn't want to introduce anyone into that environment. It felt like handing someone I cared about a seat at a table where they'd be mocked on arrival. So I kept my relationships private, short-term, or both. It was easier that way. Then, 8 months ago, I met Alec. He's 33, a trauma surgeon. We met at a design conference. He was there as the guest of a friend who was speaking on medical UI. I was there for work. We ended up grabbing coffee while waiting for our trains, and we didn't stop talking after that. What started as a casual conversation turned into daily texts, weekend visits, and late-night calls. He wasn't just kind or attractive, he was grounded. I could tell him about stressful deadlines, and instead of brushing it off, he'd remember and check in afterward. He once sent flowers to my office the day after I presented to a huge client, no card, just a smiley face drawn in pen on the receipt. With Alec, everything felt mutual. He admired my work, not just tolerated it. He respected my independence and never made me feel like I had to shrink myself to fit his world. I've been called a lot to handle before. Alec called me impressive. We talked about everything: marriage, money, timelines, kids. We were aligned from the beginning. 6 months in, we got engaged. There was no big proposal. We were sitting on the floor with takeout, talking about moving in, and decided it made sense to make it official. I didn't tell my family. Not because I was hiding him. I just didn't want him to become another punchline. I needed this to be ours first, untouched by the passive-aggressive comments or sarcastic remarks. I knew they'd find out eventually. I just wanted to control when and how. That brings me to this year, Christmas at my parents' place. Dylan would fly in from the city, Ellie and her family would already be there, and my parents would be putting together a traditional roast like always. The difference? This time I wouldn't be arriving solo. Alec was flying in on the 23rd. I'd already wrapped the presents, thoughtful things we picked out together. I had my ring box packed, not to show off, but because I wasn't hiding it anymore. I had gone over everything in my head, what I would tolerate, what I wouldn't. If someone made a joke, I wouldn't laugh it off. If someone tried to downplay the engagement, I wouldn't justify it. I wasn't going there to start a war, but I also wasn't going there to make anyone comfortable at my expense. Ellie would probably have her slideshow ready, Aspen ski photos, updates about her oldest learning Mandarin, maybe even a home renovation thrown in. I knew the routine, but this time I wasn't going to be the side act to someone else's spotlight. I was arriving with Alec, not as a trophy, not as proof. Just as myself, steady, secure, and not asking for permission. This year, when I walked through that door, I wouldn't be the family's running joke. There'd be no soft introductions, no long explanations. Just me, Alec, and a quiet understanding between us that whatever they thought, whatever they said, wouldn't touch what we had. We got to my parents' place a little after 3 p.m. on Christmas Eve. It had just started snowing, the kind that doesn't stick, just dances in the air. Alec carried the gifts while I handled the door. Ellie opened it. She was holding a half-full wine glass, wearing a beige sweater and jeans that looked freshly steamed. Her eyes went from me to Alec, then back to me. Her smile came too late and stopped halfway up her cheeks. "You brought someone?" She stepped aside like it was a question, not a greeting. Alec gave her a polite nod and walked in. The living room smelled like cinnamon and roast beef. The decorations were the same as always, the same wreath from 10 years ago, the same stockings with our names in red felt letters. My mother and father came out of the kitchen. My mom blinked once, then said hello with a voice 2 shades too high. My dad stared at Alec's face, then his shoes, then finally stuck out his hand. The shake was quick. No one mentioned that I wasn't alone. That was the first time in a decade no one made a crack about my +0 status. But it wasn't replaced with warmth, just silence. Dylan arrived about 20 minutes later, tossed his overnight bag on the floor, and hugged me. He raised an eyebrow at Alec, then nodded with approval. Alec introduced himself. My dad retreated to check the oven. Ellie walked past us, topping off her glass without a word. We sat down for dinner at 6. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, glazed carrots, and cranberry sauce from a can. Alec complimented the meal, asked about the recipe. My mom mumbled something about a magazine she couldn't remember. Ellie jumped in with a question, asked Alec what he did. When he answered trauma surgeon, her eyebrows went up. She followed with, "So you're okay with someone as independent as Caroline?" Alec didn't blink. He said that was exactly what he liked about me. I didn't wait for people to hand me space. I made it. No pause. No irony. Just a simple answer. Ellie didn't reply. After dessert, store-bought pumpkin pie and decaf coffee, I stood up and said we were engaged. No speeches. No showing off the ring. Just a sentence dropped between bites. Dylan was the first to speak. He said congratulations, grinning as he leaned back in his chair. That seemed to cue the rest of them. My mom nodded slowly. My dad said something about needing more wine. Ellie didn't say anything. She stared at the pie like it had betrayed her. My mom asked how long we'd been together. Before I could answer, Ellie said, "So this is kind of sudden, right?" I explained we'd been dating for 8 months. We'd spent nearly every weekend together, had discussed long-term plans, and were on the same page about the important stuff. This wasn't rushed, just quiet until now. Ellie tilted her head. Looks fade. I hope there's more to him than that. Alex smiled and said he hoped so too. Then he asked Dylan if he wanted help clearing plates. The conversation shifted to weather, work, the rising cost of airline tickets. It all felt rehearsed, like we were reading from a script where none of the lines landed. After dinner, while I was loading the dishwasher, Dylan pulled me aside. He said Alex seemed like the real deal. Then he admitted he didn't think I'd find someone who could keep up with me and still seem at ease. Said he was glad he was wrong. I told him thanks and handed him a wet plate. I caught my mom watching us from the hallway. She motioned me over and asked if Alec had any history. Her voice dropped when she said the word, like it had weight. I said no. No ex-wives, no secret children, no red flags. She nodded but didn't ask anything else. Just walked off like she'd confirmed a theory that never existed. Alec and I went to the guest room around 10. He set our suitcases in the closet, while I folded the clothes we'd need for the next day. I offered him a drink, something stronger, but he shook his head and sat on the edge of the bed. He told me this was nothing new. Families like this, they test you. He said it always starts with polite smiles and ends with quiet power plays. He wasn't angry, just observant. Then he asked where the extra blanket was. I pointed to the bottom drawer and turned off the light. I didn't need to explain anything. I didn't need to defend anyone either. For once, I wasn't standing in between two sides trying to keep the peace. Alec was steady, unaffected, and didn't flinch once. That night, the silence outside matched the house inside. But for the first time, I wasn't bracing myself for it alone. Christmas morning started loud, fast, and messy, just like always. Wrapping paper everywhere, coffee brewing nonstop, and Ellie's youngest running laps around the dining table in brand new dinosaur slippers. Alec came down dressed, alert, and holding a stack of neatly wrapped gifts. He passed them out one by one without much fanfare. He gave my dad a rare out-of-print cookbook on Pennsylvania Dutch recipes. Dad turned the pages twice, flipped to the pickling section, and said it reminded him of something his mother used to make. That was the most genuine I'd seen him all weekend. Alec handed my mom a candle, not just any candle, but a hand-poured soy blend with a scent that somehow matched the color scheme of the living room. She opened it slowly, said it was too much, then set it on the mantle without putting it back in the box. That was her version of approval. Ellie opened her gift from her husband, a generic spa gift card. She gave him a thumbs up and then glanced across the room as her son tore into a brightly colored science kit from Alec. She looked from the kit to Alec like she was trying to figure out how he even knew what her kid liked. Alec sat on the floor with the kids and helped them put together a Lego city bus. He didn't take over or show off, just read the instructions while the boys snapped bricks into place. Ellie's husband stayed in the corner with his phone in one hand and coffee in the other, barely looking up. My mother walked by once to refill Alec's cup before he could ask. She came back a minute later with a muffin, then a second helping. Then she laughed, too loudly, when he made a comment about the Lego minifigures having better public transport than most cities. It didn't feel like she was warming up to him. It felt more like recalculating, like she'd underestimated him and was now trying to figure out how to keep up. During brunch, the table was mostly quiet until Ellie said, "Guess waiting until 30 worked out after all." Nobody laughed. Dylan changed the subject by asking about Alec's hospital schedule. My dad picked it up from there and started asking about medical school, residency hours, and trauma shifts. That kept the conversation going and normal for a while. But just when it felt like things were finally leveling out, my dad added, "Just didn't expect someone like you to choose our Caroline. No offense." Alec smiled and said, "I got lucky." No pause, no sarcasm. Just smooth and done. Later, I pulled my dad aside while refilling drinks and told him next time he could just say congratulations. He nodded and offered to slice the pie, like that made up for it. In the kitchen, while I was rinsing dishes, I heard my mom talking low to Ellie. "I'm like that, don't usually stick around." Ellie didn't sound amused or angry when she replied, "Well, he proposed. So I guess she did something right." She didn't look over. She just picked up a cookie from the counter and walked back to the living room. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. That entire conversation told me exactly where they stood. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to fix it or respond. At lunch, Alex shared a story about a patient from his early residency days, a light one involving a hospital turkey drive, a wrong address, and an entire street full of confused neighbors, who ended up having a potluck in their driveways. It was funny, quick, and somehow pulled everyone in. Even my dad chuckled. Dylan asked for more details. My mom asked what neighborhood it happened in. Ellie didn't interrupt or redirect the conversation. I sat back and listened. No one was talking over me. No one was talking about me. For once, I wasn't being described like a problem or a project. No one mentioned my single status, my quirks, or my job being too demanding for family life. That night, I curled up under the throw blanket in the guest room. Alec was reading on his phone beside me. The house was finally quiet. I realized the running joke, the one that had followed me year after year, had gone silent. Not because they'd grown. Not because they suddenly respected me, but because Alec made them hesitate. His presence changed the tone. He wasn't loud or flashy, but he didn't shrink either. And because of that, for the first time in a decade, I didn't have to either. Alec and I took a walk around the neighborhood the next morning. The snow hadn't stuck, but the sky was overcast and the streets were quiet. We passed a few houses with wreaths on the doors and plastic reindeer in the yard. Alec mentioned how certain things felt off. Not dramatic, just slightly out of rhythm. I told him that warmth in my family usually came with conditions. He didn't push for more. When we got back, Ellie was in the kitchen alone, chopping celery like she was mad at it. She looked up and said Mom and Dad had gone to check on a neighbor on Christmas morning. No one had mentioned plans. Alec offered to step out for a call. He headed to the living room while I put on a kettle. Ellie stood there, watching. Then she asked if this whole visit was just a game to me, like I brought Alec to prove something. I said, no, he's my fiancé. That's the whole story. If I wanted to make an announcement, I could have done it a lot louder. She didn't back off. Said I always had it easy. I got attention without even trying. Meanwhile, she had to do everything right just to get noticed. Marriage, kids, the house, none of it earned applause. But I walk in with a guy and suddenly everyone's quiet and watching. I didn't answer. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't turn into another round. She went on, said our parents treated my dating life like it was the center of the universe. Every breakup was a tragedy. Every guy was a headline. Meanwhile, her wedding barely got a photo album. She didn't apologize, just blamed her comments over the years on built-up frustration. I didn't engage. I poured my coffee, nodded, and walked out. Alec looked up when I rejoined him but didn't ask anything. He could tell enough without me having to say it. Not long after, my mom returned and immediately asked Alec if he'd like to help carve the turkey. That was new. My dad had never let anyone else touch the knife, not even Dylan. Alec didn't hesitate. He followed her to the kitchen like it was normal. I watched from the hallway. She handed him the carving fork like she was passing a baton. My dad stood off to the side, watching but not stopping it. The shift was subtle, but clear. They were adjusting, not accepting, not welcoming, just recalibrating their positions. Dylan passed by and said he couldn't recall Mom acting that way with anyone else. He joked that Alec must have cracked the family's code in under 48 hours. At dinner, things were smoother on the surface. No barbs, no jokes. But when Alec passed the potatoes, my mom asked how he managed to afford such thoughtful gifts. She smiled when she asked, but her voice gave it away, not curiosity, discomfort. Alec didn't flinch, just said, I listen when Caroline talks about people she loves. Then he passed the bread basket to Dylan without breaking eye contact. The room went quiet for a second. No one pushed the topic further. And for once, I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it sit there. Around 4 p.m. the day after Christmas, I walked into the kitchen to the smell of rosemary chicken and my mother humming like she was hosting a cooking show. I noticed 2 extra place settings on the dining table. Before I could ask, she casually mentioned that Angela and her husband were coming over for dinner. No warning, no explanation, just dropped in like a recipe step she forgot to mention. Angela wasn't just a family friend. Growing up, she was the polished, perfect girl whose mother was best friends with mine. She had piano recitals, clean handwriting, and a wall full of certificates. Every time Angela visited, my mom would start her sentences with, "You know what Angela's doing now?" and finish them with a new milestone I didn't ask to hear. They arrived just after 5. Angela stepped in wearing a tailored coat and heels too sharp for snow. She glanced at my engagement ring, smiled, and said, "Oh wow, it's more delicate than I expected." Her husband stood behind her with a tight-lipped smile, already scanning the room. Dinner started civil, until Angela's husband leaned toward Alec and asked if being with someone as independent as me ever made things difficult to balance. Alec didn't blink, said he's never had to keep up because we moved together. Then he passed the bread without missing a beat. Angela tried again, asking Alec about hospital life, then pivoting to whether it gave him enough time to be present in a relationship like this one. She didn't name what like this one meant, but it hung in the air. Ellie, surprisingly, stayed silent. She didn't agree, didn't jump in, just watched. It hit me after the third loaded question. Angela wasn't there by chance. My mom had invited her hoping her husband would show Alec up. It was a comparison dinner, and we were the unannounced contestants. Alec didn't bite. He smiled, gave short answers, never defensive. Angela kept circling, but never landed a hit. When she asked how I managed to land someone like him, I answered, mutual respect. Revolutionary, I know. Angela's expression didn't crack, but she asked for her coat 10 minutes later and said they had an early drive. She barely said goodbye, and her husband didn't even finish his drink. After they left, my mom said Angela was probably just surprised. Then she added, "You two look unusual together," like she was trying to walk back a comment she hadn't technically made. I told her clearly, "That's the last time I get ambushed like that." She blinked, mouth slightly open, but didn't argue. Dylan, holding a half-empty glass of wine, clapped twice and said, "About time." Then he laughed, and for once, so did everyone else. That night, Alec told me I handled it perfectly, that I never gave her the scene she wanted. He said that takes more strength than arguing. We sat on the couch, finished the last slice of pie, and didn't say much else. When I finally went to bed, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I just felt solid, like I hadn't bent, not once. The morning after Angela's visit, the house felt different. Not cheerful, but lighter. No one was whispering in corners or pretending not to watch each other. The tension that had been thick since Alec and I arrived was still there, but stretched thinner, like it had lost its energy. My mom started packing away the holiday dishes while my dad took down lights from the porch. Ellie surprised me by showing up next to the tree with a storage bin and asking if I needed help. No one had to prompt her. She just joined me as I wrapped ornaments and sorted out the tangled lights. We worked in quiet for a few minutes before Ellie said she might have been a little harsh over the years. She didn't say it like an apology, just an observation. I told her we didn't need to do a whole reconciliation thing. We could just be civil. She nodded and kept sorting hooks from ribbon. There was no grand hug, no deep eye contact, no soft piano music in the background. Just us, putting away decorations without snapping at each other. And honestly, that was enough. Over lunch, my mom mentioned that they hadn't expected me to show up with big news like that. She said it casually, like that explained everything. The cold greeting, the questions, the way Angela was invited with no context. My dad, somewhere between awkward and earnest, turned to Alec and asked if he'd be interested in joining him and Dylan for a spring fishing trip. Alec looked up from his plate and said sure, if his schedule allowed. Dylan raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. They still hadn't said sorry. No one admitted to anything, but they were shifting. My mom wasn't forcing smiles anymore. She was just quiet, watching. My dad wasn't making jokes about commitment or being too busy to meet anyone. There was no affection in the air, but there also wasn't rejection. The room had changed temperature. Later, while I was drying dishes, my mom came over and asked to see the ring again. This time, she didn't do it like a test. She just wanted a closer look. I slipped it off and handed it to her. She studied it under the kitchen light and nodded, then passed it back without a word. While wiping down the counter, she asked if we were planning to do Christmas cards next year. She didn't phrase it like a question about paper. It was a question about permanence. I said probably. That was enough. Alec had to leave that evening. He had an early shift back in New York and needed to get on the road before dark. We carried his bag to the car together. No one followed us out. He promised to see me on the 28th like we planned. We kissed goodbye, quick and private. I turned back toward the house and saw my mom watching through the window. She didn't wave or smile, just stood there. A few hours later, as I zipped up my last suitcase, she walked into the kitchen and handed me a slice of pie in a container. It's for the road. She didn't say anything else. She's only ever done that for Ellie. I packed the rest of my things slowly. No one rushed me. Dylan passed by the door, suitcase slung over his shoulder, and told me next year we'll save a chair for him, not last minute. I nodded and closed my case. I pulled out of the driveway without anyone yelling reminders or asking about traffic. The porch light stayed on, but the curtains didn't move. On the drive back, it hit me. No one called me single. No one asked when I was going to settle down. No one made me the joke. They didn't accept Alec because I asked them to. They didn't congratulate us with open arms, but they didn't shrink me, either. I left not as the cautionary tale, not as the failure to launch, not as the girl who everyone pitied behind her back. This time I left on my own terms, not their favorite, maybe, but definitely not their punchline. I got back to New York on the evening of the 27th. Alec picked me up from the train station with a coffee in hand and a small bouquet of grocery store flowers. We didn't talk much in the car, just sat in the quiet, city lights bouncing off the windshield, the weight of the trip still somewhere in my coat pockets. The next morning, I unpacked the pie my mom had packed and set it in Alec's fridge. He laughed and asked if I was going to eat it or preserve it like a family relic. I said I hadn't decided yet. That afternoon, we went for a walk in Central Park. It was cold, but the sun was out. At one point, Alec paused and asked if I wanted to set a date, not for the wedding, but for when we'd tell his family. I said yes. We agreed on February, after his sister's birthday, to avoid overshadowing anything. Back at his apartment, I noticed a small stack of wedding magazines on his bookshelf. He hadn't mentioned them before, said one of his coworkers gave them to him after hearing he was engaged. I took one, flipped it open, and found a checklist with venue, guest list, and family conversations circled in red pen. We ordered Thai food that night and watched a movie neither of us finished. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A group chat lit up, family-wide. My dad had sent a photo of the fishing rods he planned to clean up for spring. One message from Ellie followed, "He's really coming with you, huh?" I replied with a thumbs up emoji and didn't say anything else. The next day, I mailed my mom a New Year's card. Nothing fancy, just a short note and a photo of Alec and me at the park. A week later, I got a card in return. Inside was a short line in her handwriting, "You two looked peaceful." By the second week of January, Alec's parents invited me over for dinner. It was uneventful in the best way. His mom served too much food, his dad asked about my job, and nobody made any backhanded jokes about timing, age, or independence. Back in my apartment, I started packing a few boxes. Alec and I hadn't officially said I was moving in, but we'd cleared out space in his closet and added my name to his lease application. It was happening. Quietly, steadily, without spectacle. I got a text from Dylan asking if Alec was still in the picture. I sent him a photo of Alec fixing my sink and wrote, "Very much so." He responded with, "Good. About time this family leveled up. No arguments, no passive digs, just movement. Clean, forward, and long overdue."